Now, in news just in, customs officers and police have seized 300 kilograms of cocaine worth just over R1 billion at the Durban harbour. SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter joins me now just to give us more details. Thank you very much for your time here on eNCA, Mr. Kieswetter. So, do we know at all where this cocaine, for instance, is coming from?
Good morning. So, first of all, we survey and our National Targeting Unit profiles all vessels that heads towards South African waters and ports. In this particular instance, this vessel hails from South America, and our Customs National Targeting Unit have been leading a week-long operation together with our Marine Unit, as well as the South African Police Services and the Detective Services, along with Crime Intelligence. And this is how we had profiled this particular vessel as a high-risk vessel. That led to an intervention this morning based on the surveillance and risk profiling. We conducted an early morning raid in the Durban harbour and led to the discovery of 300 kilograms of cocaine in 378 bricks to the value of 1.3 billion. I think the good news here is that it's a demonstration of the success we can have if we work together between different agencies of government. And in this case, the SARS Customs, together with the South African Police Force and Crime Intelligence and the Detective Services, should be complemented for sterling work.
And what informed the raid? For instance, you say you were following this particular vessel for quite some time. Did you have a tip-off, and who else were you working with? Usually, SARS works with other law enforcement agencies in this.
So Crime Intelligence, together with our National Targeting Unit, is where we would find the early lead indicators that a particular vessel is suspicious in terms of its operation and in particular in terms of its cargo. We obviously will also look at the documents that they had filed, and then when we note discrepancy between what is declared with what we suspect may be in fact the actual cargo, we would initially, after conducting the initial surveillance and investigation, we would take considered decision as to whether we want to intervene. Remember, we cannot intervene in every vessel. Our job is to balance the fine balance between facilitating trade so that it comes through our ports of entry efficiently, whilst at the same time detecting and intervening when there is a risk to the country. And in this case, the intelligence that we received and gathered between the agencies was spot on.
Right, Mr. Kieswetter, while I still have you, I have to just ask you a question around the budget that was delivered by the Finance Minister earlier this week, and your thoughts around that, especially because as SARS you play a very significant role in terms of the tax revenue that you'll be collecting for this year. Last year you announced that you did quite well, but you've also been quite vocal as a patriot in South Africa about how difficult life has been for the taxpayer as well. Your thoughts around the budget, around SARS this year and meeting target?
I think the first good news is that the 93 billion that the minister has estimated we will collect in excess of what he set for us as an estimate a year ago. The good news is that it's 93 billion that will not have to be borrowed from the expensive markets, and therefore 93 billion less that must be serviced through already high debt servicing cost. And so that's the good news for all South Africans, and also means that the minister is able to retain and remain on his path towards fiscal responsibility and to ensure that non-interest expenditure does not exceed revenue collections and thereby maintain a primary surplus. In terms of the budget, I think given where we are, I always say a budget is somewhere between a science and an art, and a fine balance with trade-offs. And I think given the crisis we have of energy shortages, of load shedding, there has to be a significant attention, long overdue, one might argue, And even though we don't want to give more money to Eskom, as South Africans, it was necessary to intervene to strengthen and stabilize the balance sheet. In any case, the debt on Eskom's book is effectively a debt that the government underwrites. And so taking it off the balance sheet of Eskom with clear conditionalities, the intention is to create the space for Eskom to focus on fixing the existing plant to ensure that the installed capacity that we have actually produces at the level that it should be. And at the same time, it's not a single trick, it's also creating the incentives for businesses to crowd in and to make the investment, hence the additional 125% allowance will hopefully bring in more businesses. And by doing that, take pressure off the grid, but also make the load shedding, bring relief to poor people who cannot necessarily make the investment who rely on the grid for electricity. So I think it's a balanced approach. And then, of course, we all cringe when we hear other state-owned entities also receive money, and we should keep a watchful eye on that. This is a democracy, and we should hold government to account for every penny that is spent. And I think the other important message in the budget is that we still have too many South Africans, because of the absence of job growth and economic growth, is dependent on government. So maintaining the social relief of distress grant. In fact, if we look at our budget, more than 50 cents in every rand that government spends is still in one form or other towards a social wage that South Africans desperately needs, and particularly the poorest and the most vulnerable. Those of us who have the means, we can insure and buy ourselves out of these crises. But the poor and the most vulnerable, only government can step in to support them. And the minister has had to maintain this balance to ensure that there's enough to also still keep the poor from a position of total destitution if it wasn't for these social grants that we are able to pay.
All right. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Edward Kieswetter. He is the Commissioner of SARS. Thank you for your time.